I'm gonna tell everyone what you did.
That would be a major mistake.
Sicario might be one of my favorite films from 2015. Brutal, relentless, and incredibly compelling, it paints a morally grey tale about the war on drugs. Told by Taylor Sheridan's brilliant script and Denis Villeneuve's tactical direction, and anchored by amazing performances from Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, and Benicio del Toro. But what I really wanted to talk about is a scene in this movie that, since I first watched it, has not only deeply disturbed me, but ingrained itself into my brain like a parasite. And I believe it's the perfect jumpstart for today's topic. But first, some quick context. After extraditing an important member of the cartel, Alejandro Del Toro's character enters the room to question him, and right from the get-go, things get very uncomfortable. Alejandro walks in with a water jug for reasons we don't know why, gets his crotch incredibly close to the guy, and the other agent knows something really effed up is about to happen and just bails out. The tension in the scene keeps racketing up, and after a bit more threatening from his part, we cut to this. The scene ends with this shot, and what is remarkable here is not what we see, but what we hear. Villeneuve could have put his camera anywhere. He could have made the torture less ugly so that he could show it to us, or even leave the camera outside if it was too unavoidable. But he decides to stay in this drain, slowly moving towards it, and we are left with the noises of whatever is going on between these men. I have my theories of what might be happening, but when I can't say for sure, it leaves me way more freaked out than if I was actually shown the act. Without knowing exactly what is going on, your mind is forced to fill in the blanks. And this feels scarier, creepier. It makes you think, what kind of torture is so heinous that even the director is not allowing you to witness? All of this disturbs you because in this scene, specifically, it's all about what you don't see. And the more I watch and dissect movies, TV shows, mangas, video games, all sorts of media honestly, I keep getting more and more fascinated with this idea. This filmmaking device, so to say. The one where it actively hides the horror from you, where you're not allowed to see whatever is going on at a certain moment. The monster that just revealed itself, an act of violence, a horrifying sight. You're not looking at whatever was designed to trigger an emotional response from you, and yet, it scares you just as much or even more than if the movie had just shown it to you. It's something that, no matter when it happens or how, it raises the hair in the back of my neck and freaks me out completely. But why do we see so little of it, especially in horror movies nowadays? And more importantly, why is it so effective? This is The Pretentious Writer, and today I want to talk about the horror of not showing. The one that, as I said before, you don't see. I think the first and probably the strongest reason this filmmaking device feels so effective and unnerving is something that I just mentioned. It forces you to put the pieces together of whatever is happening off screen. And that ends up being way more terrifying. I mean, just think about it. How many times in your life have you found yourself filled with fear or in a stressful situation and started creating demons inside your head, catastrophizing and waiting for the worst, only for the actual events to end up being way less scary than you initially imagined? Or, since we're talking about movies, how many times have you watched something where you're trying to figure out a certain mystery and then after it gets revealed, you feel disappointed because whatever you had created in your mind felt way more exciting than the actual answers the movie presented to you? This all stems from this one idea, one that we often forget, that as humans, our imagination can go wild and sometimes create way more elaborate scenarios than what's actually the truth. One example of a movie that employs this to perfection is a surprisingly recent one, The Batman. Throughout all the grimy and gritty brutality that we're exposed in its 3 hours, there's no scene that has unsettled me more than the moment where Selina plays the call that her roommate, Anika, made to her before she was killed.
Some drop sting, and that's how he became mayor.
Okay.
It already gets you on edge when you hear Carmine talking to her, but then she despairs and releases a scream that is just bone-chilling. You know from the subsequent sounds that she's being strangled to death, but because you can't see it, you're left with only your mind filling the blanks, creating the image in your head. The bruises, the lifeless eyes on whoever is committing such atrocious acts, the tears on her face as they snuff the life out of her. Could they have shown us this scene? Yes, I mean, we have watched R-rated films that are twice as violent as The Batman. But would it have been this disturbing? Another great example that grabs this filmmaking device and uses it to basically carry the story from beginning to end is the Blair Witch Project. You watch the entire movie and not once do you see the famous witch. You see shades of it, you see the symbols, you hear noises and punches at their tents. And this serves to rack up the tension. You dread to think about what the hell is this creepy thing that is stalking them. And then when the movie ends and doesn't show you, you're left with that dread, unchanged, and now your mind is forced to, once again, fill in the blanks. And in my opinion, this was a big reason to why the movie was so successful. Of course, a lot of credit can go to the brilliant marketing tools they employed at that time to sell it, but this can only take you so far. Like it or not, there was an element of mystery, of powerlessness that the movie employs on its characters and eventually on us, the audience, that has a staying power. And I think powerlessness is a very fitting word to describe another point that makes this storytelling tool so great for me. I'm talking about the loss of control. Now, here's something that I hope sounds less cheesy than it is. It's a metaphor that I have to describe the relationship between the director, their movie, and the audience. It goes something like this. If the movie is this pocket universe, so to say, the director is their god and we are their angels. Everything we watch and experience is according to the director's whim. Only they decide what is being shown, how, and when. But at the same time, there's also the sense of omnipresence that the audience possesses. We get to know information that characters aren't aware of. We're able to watch situations from more than one point of view and even flash back or forward in the story. As I said, it's like we're omnipresent. We're not gods, but when watching a movie, sometimes we almost feel like it. Like we are watching these people from a higher plane of existence. So, when the movie creates something terrifying and purposefully leaves us in the dark, it's like the director, as the almighty god we look up to, strips us from our power and grounds us with the characters. Now, you're not watching things from above, you're there with them, as lost as they are. Sometimes, like the aforementioned Blair Witch, it's worse because even the characters are being shown something that you're not. It's a feeling of vulnerability, of hearing someone banging violently at the door of your apartment, and you're so terrified that you can't even look through the peephole. You just straight up call the cops and tries to scare off whatever is on the other side. A scene that illustrates this idea perfectly comes, out of all places, from HBO's Barry. Out of all the harrowing events in the finale of Barry's third season, none has borderline traumatized me as the sequence where NoHo Hank, played beautifully by Anthony Carrigan, is handcuffed in a cell. He communicates with his friends on the other side of the wall, who are planning to escape their captivity and release him. But things quickly go south when the guards show up with a creature and just let it loose on their cell. What follows is almost 2 minutes of sonic torture, because instead of showing us the carnage, during the whole sequence, you're there with NoHo Hank and NoHo Hank only, stuck in this auditory nightmare as you both are forced to hear the agonizing screams of his colleagues, while the lion or panther, or whatever the fuck that thing is, roars and tears them apart. You're tense, praying for Hank to find a way out of this situation, and it goes back to what I said before, the fact that you don't see anything forces you to use your imagination and picture what kind of horrible pain is being inflicted on those guys. But it's also about the powerlessness, the fact that you were there with Hank, stuck in the cell with him, seeing and hearing things from his very limited point of view, that makes you small and turns a scary situation into a truly horrifying one. You, as the audience, loses the control at this certain moment because the director wants you to, and without a doubt, you feel it. This reason, alongside the others I mentioned during this video, are the main ones that makes this filmmaking device so powerful. But they're not everything, because the act of not showing something, as blood-curdling as it is, can also be employed in other ways, and even when done in half measures can be extremely effective. Look at The Witch, for example. A masterclass of indie horror, it's a movie mostly devoid of jump scares, relying on mood and disturbing imagery from time to time to freak you out and keep the audience on edge. And there is a quick scene in this movie that encapsulates the movie's vibe to a T and employs this technique we've been talking about, but this time, only half of it. It's right after the witch kidnaps the baby. As night falls, we see the witch's cabin, and we are shown this short montage. The witch ominously caressing the baby before getting a knife close to him, her rubbing herself with blood and then climaxing with her facing the moon outside. You don't need to watch everything uncut to know exactly what happened there, and if you had, it's possible you'd be sickened, feel like throwing up, the type of reaction you'd probably have if you watched a Serbian film, for example. But because you're not shown part of it, the movie instead suggesting to you what just transpired, when mixed with the great music and sound design, it leaves you feeling disgusted, creeped out of your mind. The director doesn't leave you entirely in the dark, but he offers only enough information to strengthen that sense of dread. That feeling that, even though you're not seeing everything, you're witnessing something truly ungodly and unspeakable. And talking about that sense of dread, I wanted to close out this video with one final example. I've talked about how not seeing the horror can elevate it, make it bigger on your mind, and even how showing a piece of it can be just as powerful. But what if you do have to show something? You need that shock, or you have a crystal clear horrifying image you want to put on screen. Can this method help you achieve your objective? Well, I believe it can. And here is the best proof of it. Ari Aster's Hereditary. Whoever knows this movie knows this scene. Alongside the ending, it's probably its most impactful moment. A ghastly event that gets everyone by surprise and leaves us in utter shock for the entirety of it. And this is where things get interesting, because right after the accident happens, Aster decides to leave us with Peter, Alex Wolff's character. From the moment he stops the car to when he gets back home, we do not leave his point of view. And it's made even worse by the fact that Peter is completely paralyzed, to the point where his mind has gone blank and he can't act. He's unable to, almost in a state of denial. Once again, we could have seen the result, but we don't. You know what happened, you have zero doubts about what's sitting there at the side of the road, but you're not allowed to see. Not yet. During this entire sequence, unlike the other examples I mentioned in this video, the fact that you are not being shown what happened is not the main course, the focus of the horror. It's secondary, because the true horror is about to happen in a minute. But it still is a key aspect of the scene, because this builds tension. It builds sheer, concentrated dread, as you're forced to just look at Peter, check in the rearview mirror, completely shell-shocked. Will you see it? Do you want to see it? You have no idea. A part of you wants to, but another part of you don't. And the dread keeps growing and growing, as Peter decides to just go back home and lay down on his bed. Morning comes, and now you anticipate the moment where the mother is gonna find his sister's body on the back seat of the car. And as you hear her bone-chilling scream, as the horror gives in to heartbreak, as you are about to drop your guard, it comes. The imagery that Aster was holding back all this time. Pure, unfiltered. Now, I ask of you, is the image by itself horrifying? Yes, without a doubt. But would it have been this shocking if not for the massive build-up it did back there, purposefully hiding from us just so we could anticipate its revelation and be given it in the right moment, at the right time? I honestly, sincerely, don't think so. It is effective precisely because the movie anticipates it for us, and delivers on the promise when you least expect it, coming like a punch to the gut. The horror that you don't see becomes visible, and now, finally face to face with it, you question whether you wanted to see it at all. As a huge horror fan, this is a very crazy topic that I wanted to talk for a long time. This feels like such an underrated idea that movies employ from time to time, but one that never ceases to impress and freak the fuck out of me. This video was supposed to come out way sooner, but I kept postponing because I wanted to get the script on the best place possible. I don't know if I got it, I might be beating myself over missed opportunities here for a while, but at the end of the day, there's only one person who can say whether this was good or not. And that's you. So, what did you think? Whether you're a horror fan or not, do you like this filmmaking device of being not shown something? Do you think horror movies and movies in general should make better use of it? As always, let me know in the comments, and this has been The Pretentious Writer. See you next time.